We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio. I'm Mark Angelides still, and we continue to be joined by Liberty Nation's national security correspondent, Dave Patterson. Now, Dave, I want to move things on to what's happening with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. So there's been the enormous signal brouhaha, which the media were just desperate to call Signalgate. And we've covered this on the pages of libertynation.com quite exhaustively, I think. But I want to bring your attention to something I read this week in the New York Times, because it's so stunningly, what's the right word to say this? It shows a lack of awareness in reporting. And these are people who are reporting on, military issues, defense issues. And they were discussing Pete Hegseth being in a group. Let's be very clear that he didn't start, right? He didn't start the group, but that he was in there and he was talking about things in that group among people who you would expect him to talk with. And I should really point this out because most people don't know this. The CISA, CISA, which is the Cyber Security Information Systems Agency for the government, put out a notice in December of 2024 under Joe Biden that people should, where possible, use end-to-end encryption apps for communications, quote, such as Signal. So I should point that out that it was one that was actually recommended to use by the cybersecurity agency. So anyway, back to the plot. Sorry. So they're talking about how it was a very bad thing for Pete Hegseth to use the Signal app, and then they go and make a comparison, and they talk about how it's difficult to imagine that two of his recent predecessors, Jim Mattis and Lloyd J. Austin III, who retired 6 ranks above Mr. Hegseth, which they love to point out, would have done such a thing. And then they go on and they do this minor mea culpa. And it's like, it's not, I quote, it's not that either man flawlessly executed the role of defense secretary, but at least they were accountable. Now, this is what I love there. And I'm sorry I'm monopolizing the time here, but they go on to reference that Lloyd Austin, he had his cancer surgery and hospitalization. And they said he was held accountable because after people discovered it, he held a 30-minute press conference and his department embarked on a 30-day review and published an Inspector General's report. So therefore, Lloyd Austin was held accountable because he did that. Dave, does the hypocrisy pain you as much as it pains me?
First of all, you said New York Times.
Yeah.
You said hypocrisy. I am shocked.
I repeat
Absolutely
myself.
shocked that you would put those two words so close together. First of all, the editorial staff of the New York Times knows as much about how the Secretary of Defense operates when they go overseas or domestically. I would like to just make the comparison that they know as much about that as the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer lion looks like Calvin Coolidge. That's a reference to James Thurber that they wouldn't know about either.
Sure.
But they're just naive. And they try to opine about stuff that goes on inside the Pentagon. And they have a Pentagon correspondent there, but they aren't any more clever for having been there. I mean, it's not like they get information by osmosis. They really need to have people who are kind of steeped and washed in the culture, and they're not. And so the comments about General Mattis and General Austin are just laughable. I mean, would you say that General/Secretary Austin was held accountable for the disaster in Afghanistan, for example? Not exactly.
Not exactly, yeah.
And so when you have a problem with a communications app and nobody died, 13 people did not die at the river entrance to the Pentagon because of this gaffe. And I'll tell you, it was stupid. And what people don't understand about these apps is they work just like, any iChat or anything. If you put in an initial, it'll go to your contacts and pull up a name.
Yeah.
And, it could have been Jonah Goldberg, right? Instead of Jeffrey Goldberg. And of course, then one has to wonder why this Jeffrey Goldberg was in his contacts, but it could have been when he was a congressman. Electrons are forever.
Sure, and of course, there's still the outstanding questions of whether these apps and therefore the contacts were preloaded onto the devices that were used by the Trump administration officials, because that would quite readily explain. Yeah, because that would quite readily explain why Jeffrey Goldberg was on there.
Well, what it does is it just, you get signal on your phone. If preloaded, it doesn't know your contacts. You put in your contacts.
Yeah.
And, now they're there.
So I think the question everybody wants to know is, there is a concerted effort to apply public pressure to Donald Trump, which obviously these people have been asleep for the last 9 years if they think that public pressure is going to hit Donald Trump. I mean, he might fire Pete Hegseth for any number of reasons, from saying that he doesn't like cheese on his burgers to preferring full-fat Coke to Diet Coke. Could be anything at all. But public pressure is not likely to be the thing that makes Donald Trump fire Secretary Hegseth. But there is a full court press within the Fourth Estate saying that Hegseth must resign. And I don't think he's going to do it. And I don't think Donald Trump's going to fire him. What's your take on it?
I don't think he's going to fire him. Again, the Fourth Estate has very little understanding of how the National Security Council works and the Principals Committee. And the fact is that you call a meeting. Now, when I was in the Pentagon, people actually went over to the
when the world was black and white and dinosaurs roamed the earth.
Yeah. So, and the other thing that I think where there will be changes is you don't get to go on your handheld app anymore. There was that capability in the past, but you didn't do that. You went to a Civets, you went to a closed, secure video conference so that you had everybody there. You knew who was in the room, obviously, because you could see them. And okay, it's more convenient, but there's a time when you have to put convenience away in deference to national security. And I think that they're probably going to go back to that sort of of an approach to things, and they should.
Well, they'll have once they go back to that, which I agree with you. I think they will. There'll be a 30-minute press conference and a 30-day review by the department, and accountability, according to the New York Times, will have been held. Dave Patterson, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it. You're a superstar.
Hey, thank you, Mark. It's always a pleasure.
And that's all we have time for on this week's edition of Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio American Network. I'd like to thank our guests today for their time, talent, and trouble. And of course, extend my thanks to you, the listeners, for tuning in each and every week. And please remember, Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates, campaigns, nor legislation. And this presentation is no endorsement.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.